Hey everyone, it's Dylan from the Black Forest Wood Company, and this week we're going to be making a black walnut dining table with tinted resin, but we didn't get this wood from our usual supplier, GL Veneer. We also have another supplier that we work with from rural Ontario, and let's put it this way, it's much less of a high-tech operation. He primarily works with all the Amish communities that live around him in rural Ontario, and we actually have done a video on this where we went out there and we visited some of these sawmills, and it's quite a fascinating process that they go through to mill a lot of this wood. None of it is done using electricity, so they have different means of generating energy. They'll hook up diesel engines with pulleys to a lot of their equipment as opposed to just plugging them in. So it's really interesting to see a lot of these sawmills or band saws that are retrofitted to work off a diesel engine. In one of the shops that we visited, they had an old tractor that was sitting in the corner, and then they had this entire pulley system leading off of it to all the different machines in their shop. And when they wanted to use any of the saws, they just fired up that old diesel tractor, and that gave them juice. So this is Canadian black walnut, which is a little bit different than the California walnut we get from GL Veneer. The California types of walnut that we typically work with are Claro walnut and Bastogne walnut. Sometimes we'll see some English walnut in the grafted slabs that we use as well, but it's not quite as common. Claro walnut is known for having a really rich red color, while Bastogne walnut is quite popular because of the dark veining that goes all the way throughout it. On the other hand, Canadian black walnut is a lot more even in its color tone, and while I don't know the exact reasons why this happens, from what I've heard from some of these sawmill operators is that it has a lot to do with the mineral content in the soil of where these trees grow. So obviously up here in northern Canada, it's a lot different down in southern California, and hence we get this quite different appearance in these pieces of wood. It's a lot more uniform in its color, and some of the pieces almost have a purplish hue to them. So we followed our standard process up until this point. We've flattened the slabs, we've cut them to size to fit in the mold, and now we're going to start mixing up the resin. The drying process that these slabs went through with the Amish supplier is quite similar to what GL Veneer does, again, just with lower levels of technology. So they start off by milling the slabs to just over 3 inches thick, same as what we're used to, and from there they go on sticks and they'll air dry in a barn, usually for 1 year per inch of thickness. This, in some cases, might seem like overkill. If you're just trying to dry dimensional lumber, you might not need to air dry for this long, but with these slabs, we want to maintain as much of the natural character in them as possible, and that's what the advantage of the 3-year air drying process is. You don't lose a lot of that color by throwing it in the kiln right away. So after the slabs sit for 3 years, then they go in a kiln for a 6-month process, which will bring them down usually somewhere between 7 to 9% moisture content. Now, being that these slabs come from Ontario, once they come out of the kiln, they start gaining moisture right away because their equilibrium moisture content is somewhere around 12 to 14%. But once they get shipped out here to Calgary, we let them sit for another few months before we do anything to work on them, just to let them acclimatize to our shop and the drier climate that we have here in Calgary. One advantage that we have about building our furniture in a drier climate is that it's more stressful on wood in most cases to go from a humid climate to a dry climate if you're shipping a finished piece of furniture. That's usually when you'll see shrinkage happening and you can get cracks that will grow larger. On the other hand, if you're going from somewhere drier to somewhere more humid, the pieces may expand, but it's not quite as common that you'll see cracking. That's part of why our Black Forest deep resin was formulated with elasticity for when we're building these resin tables with the large natural edge pieces of wood. If we were to use a resin that dried hard and brittle, when those slabs went to expand and contract, there's a very good chance that you would either get separation from the edge and the piece of resin, or in a worst case scenario, you could even get cracking all the way across the resin from the piece of wood expanding so much. So our resin is formulated to be at that fine line where you have a hard, durable surface that's suitable for dining, but it still has some give for when these slabs move seasonally.
Keep going. Fantastic. Now that's away.
Once the pour has been demolded, we can get it lifted down onto our CNC machine to remove that excess layer of resin. Now, one question that we get a lot is how do we handle any chance of warping on our slabs? The number one thing we do, I've already mentioned, that's ensuring that the wood is properly dried and climatized before we do any kind of work on it. Now, the other consideration here on why we don't necessarily need a C-channel on these big wide tables is there's a piece of resin separating the individual pieces of wood. Even on this table being 5 feet wide, the individual slabs are no more than about 24 to 30 inches at their very widest points, and in some areas they're only about 18 inches wide. So the chance of those pieces cupping on their own is very slim, considering the fact that all of this wood has been dried, and it's not like the entire 5-foot width is going to warp like a piece of wood will. That resin in the middle that separates the two slabs is quite stable so long as it's supported properly by some kind of structure underneath. And that's where you'll see later in the video, we design our bases to have recessed plates in strategic locations under the slab, not only to support the table and hold it flat, but also to try and prevent any of that chance of warping. This table ended up being one of the very last pieces that went through this old sander. And you can tell by me speaking in past tense right now, the sander is gone. So if you guys stick around until the end of the video, we'll give you a little sneak peek of the new machine as we have it delivered into our shop. We're not quite ready to release the video yet as all the electricity hasn't been connected, but as soon as that's done, you guys can also expect a video on the full delivery process and us sending our first tables through our new SCM machine. Up until this point here, on a table this large, we're spending many hours on the flattening process on our CNC machine. And something this big, going 0.5 millimeter at a time to make sure we get a clean cut, you can spend a whole day getting both sides of this table perfectly flat and clean. Once we have the flattening complete and we're on to the sanding, we can fill in those imperfections using our Black Forest Quick Fix epoxy. It cures in about 15 minutes, so as opposed to pouring something and having to wait 24 hours or the next day to begin your work again, you can pour that in, go have a coffee, go have lunch, and come back and your pieces are going to be ready to sand. And here's what I mentioned earlier about those strategic locations for our mounting plates on this table. This is going to get one of our X spaces, and because it has a river going down the center, we can't exactly put a steel plate right on that epoxy section, but we can put steel plates on either side of the slab to prevent any warping. You'll see for the end pieces on the X base, or those long sections, we've offset one of the plates that's going to sit on top of the leg so that instead of seeing it, like I mentioned earlier, right through that epoxy, it's offset and it's going to land completely underneath the wood just to give us an unobstructed view through the resin on this table, because the client has selected a tinted resin that's going to show through to the floor.
You know what gets me fired up for woodworking? Canada Dry.
And now we can move on to the finishing process for this table. This is pretty standard for what we do on most of our pieces these days. It's our Black Forest furniture oil that we'll apply 2 coats of, and we follow that up with a couple coats of our Black Forest ceramic coating. This is one of the 2 options that we offer to our clients. The other one is a sprayed acrylic urethane finish, and it's probably about 70-30 in favor of oil finishes that our clients go for. The oil finish is going to leave more of a natural look and feel over the slab, so when you're running your hands across the surface of the table, even if you had your eyes closed, you're going to be able to feel the difference between the epoxy sections and the wooden sections. The walnut is going to have a nice natural texture over the grain, whereas the epoxy is going to have that glassy, smooth texture. If we were to finish this table with the acrylic urethane, it's going to have a completely even feel across the whole surface because that urethane is building up a layer over everything, whereas the oil primarily protects the piece by soaking into the surface. Once we've given that oil 1 week to sit upstairs in our finishing area and cure, then we can come along and apply the ceramic coating. So we like to do usually 2 coats of the base coat and 1 coat of top coat on our pieces, and the benefit of a ceramic coating is mostly going to come in the form of protection. So it's going to make your piece more hydrophobic and resistant to stains. It's also though going to increase your scratch resistance. An added benefit of a ceramic coating is it's going to almost look like you're applying an Instagram filter over the wood, and you're going to increase the contrast on all of the wooden sections and increase the clarity over any of those epoxy sections. From there, we can get this table lifted onto the forklift, get it set onto its base, and take it out for some photographs to send to the client before we get it shipped off to them in Los Angeles.
Because every time I wear shorts, my legs get cut.
All right, Mr. Andy.
We're looking pretty good. You guys want to shuffle this way?
Okay.
Yeah, way a bit.
Okay.
Sorry, the other way. Yeah. All right, I think we're in. We're in.
We're in?
Yeah.
Fuck, this man's so good at it. He is. I love it.
I didn't even hear the click.
You're
He is
the
the best person
on
on your table ever, man. Sweet.
To recap, this dining table was constructed with 2 slabs of Canadian black walnut from our supplier out in rural Ontario, and we paired that with a tinted black forest deep resin. It's sitting on top of a blackened ash X base with aluminum dowels, and we finished everything using our Black Forest furniture oil and some coats of our Black Forest ceramics as well. So let us know what you guys think about this piece in the comments below, and I want to know, do you guys like this Canadian black walnut, or do you prefer the California types of walnut that you see us use? Well, here's the new machine. It's in place. Like I said, it's not hooked up to any power yet, but it has been a massive effort that we've went through to get this thing installed. So I'm excited to share all of that with you guys. But to keep it short, we had to completely redo our electricity. That was one of the large expenses. Completely redid our dust collection that you can see on some of the pipes above me here. We completely redid our air, so we had to get a much more expensive compressor to handle the amount of air that this machine requires. But let's do a quick little overview here. This is the front of the machine. This is essentially the brains here on the inside. All of the computer components, that's where they exist here. This is the DMC system is what it's called. So there was the Euro system that SCM offered, and it was one step down. But since we're keeping this machine for so long, we wanted to kind of go all out and get the big one. This table is a return feed table, so if we push a table through, it can automatically come back. There's vacuum, so it will suck pieces down and hold them there so we don't get them slipping. On the inside here, we've got nice big glass doors. 4 working stations on this, right? So we've got a 54-inch helical planer head. We have 2 drums. There's a smaller drum and a bigger drum. And then back here, we have a sanding platen. There's a little flat metal pad in there, and that is going to give us a much finer finishing surface, just because it's a larger surface area that it's going to be sanding on. So now that the machine is here, We hope to have it up and running by the end of next week, and then hopefully in the week or two following that, we'll have the video out for you guys, and we'll start sending some of these tables through.
How many Charlies do you think make up this machine?
I can figure it out. Let's do the math. I think it's close to 10,000 pounds, this machine. How much does the machine weigh?
6,700 kilograms.
Okay, so times 2.25? 2.2. 6,700 kilograms times 2.2 is 14,740 pounds. Charlie weighs about 21 pounds, so we'll divide that by 21. So there's 701.9 Charlies that make up this machine. What would you rather have?